Philip Zelikow, in his capacity as the staff director for the Kane-Hamilton 9/11 Commission that delivered its report in July of 2004, is a very important figure, and he is one of the key operatives in the cover-up of the 9/11 terrorist attacks.
The guy is clearly an academic, closely related to the Bush administration, close friend of Condoleezza Rice, and he had written about so-called catastrophic terrorism before 9/11. And yeah, he was in the perfect position to see how much hay could be made out of this event, and had already talked about catastrophic terrorism and in a sense knew how it could be used. He was certainly the perfect choice for helping to write the report, because this is a guy that could see how to manipulate it in terms of people's civil liberties and getting a war going and so on. So he's a perfect guy.
Foreign Affairs, the magazine of the Council on Foreign Relations, in its November-December 1998 edition, published an article entitled "Catastrophic Terrorism: Imagining the Transformative Event." The Pearl Harbor-like event occurred just 3 years later. Philip Zelikow was one of the authors.
If the 1993 bombings of the World Trade Center had succeeded, the resulting horror and chaos would have exceeded our ability to describe it. Such an act of catastrophic terrorism would be a watershed event in American history. It could involve loss of life and property unprecedented in peacetime and undermine America's fundamental sense of security. Like Pearl Harbor, the event would divide our past and future into a before and an after. The United States might respond with draconian measures, scaling back civil liberties, allowing wider surveillance of citizens, detention of suspects, and use of deadly force. More violence would follow, either future terrorist attacks or U.S. counterattacks. Belatedly, Americans would judge their leaders negligent for not addressing terrorism more urgently.
Philip Zelikow, Catastrophic Terrorism: Imagining the Transformative Event, 1998.
He was certainly the perfect choice for helping to write the report.
Philip Zelikow, who is the head of the 9/11 Commission, has an interesting background. His thesis in college was on creating public myths. And as many of us know, 9/11 was the ultimate public myth.
Contemporary history is defined functionally by those critical people and events that go into forming the public's presumptions about its immediate past, akin to public myth, without the negative implication. Such presumptions are beliefs thought to be true, although not necessarily known to be true with certainty, and shared in common with the relevant political community.
Prior to his appointment to head the 9/11 Commission, Philip Zelikow was the executive director of the Aspen Strategy Group Markle Task Force on National Security, whose members include Cheney, Rice, and Wolfowitz.
My starting point, of course, is that these attacks were not the work of any group of Arab or Muslim fanatics, but were rather a deliberate war provocation orchestrated by the U.S. intelligence community and the security bureaucracy. But let's focus on Zelikow as an individual. When Philip Zelikow was then appointed to be the staff director doing the substantive work of the Kane-Hamilton Commission, he suffered from a crippling conflict of interest because he had such close personal ties to Miss Rice, who, of course, in her capacity as the head of the National Security Council, was one of the main people that he was going to investigate. Governor Kane of New Jersey, former Congressman Lee Hamilton from Indiana, put in ceremonial appearances, did some public speeches on the subject, but the main work was done by a staff that was directed by Philip Zelikow.
I was very excited when we got a 9/11 commission and knew we would get a 9/11 commission report, and I knew that it was going to be a report I disagreed with, just like the Warren Commission and the Warren report about the Kennedy assassination. But it was a whole bunch of new evidence, and we would be able to see more clearly what was sensitive, what they could report accurately, and what they had to lie about. We got that in the case of the report. So it becomes very important to know that the man who really controlled the direction of the investigation of the commission and the man who very much controlled the writing of the report was Philip Zelikow, this was supposed to be a group outside the government, but Zelikow had written a book with Condoleezza Rice. There was no way you could think of him as an outsider.
To confirm his ties then with Condoleezza Rice, when Condoleezza Rice took over the State Department, Zelikow was then able to get a job as one of the top bureaucrats in the State Department during the reign of Miss Rice. NORAD generals, U.S. Air Force generals, committed perjury in front of the commission by falsifying timelines and making mutually contradictory statements, and that Kane and Hamilton were aware that it was perjury. The question then arose what to do. They had a closed-door meeting of the commission staff, the members and certain key staff members. Zelikow was undoubtedly part of this meeting to decide what to do. The big question was, should the Kane-Hamilton Commission forward criminal referrals to the Department of Justice based on the lies that had been told by these NORAD generals? And the decision that came out of that meeting was, no, we do nothing. We'll leave it to the Inspectors General of the Department of Transportation for the FAA, and above all of the Pentagon for the Air Force and NORAD generals. So Mr. Zelikow seems to be a party to suborning perjury in front of the commission.
Zelikow focuses on what he calls searing or molding events that take on transcendent importance and therefore retain their power even as the experience generation passes from the scene. Wikipedia.
Philip Zelikow was so experienced at creating public myth, and then he ended up being the head of the 9/11 Commission, which we call the Cover-Up Commission, is rather revealing.
Mr. Zelikow was recruited by the administration to brief us during the transition because he was one of the foremost experts in the world on Al-Qaeda. Karen Hughes.
There's then the Able Danger cover-up. Former Congressman Kurt Weldon of Pennsylvania came forward and talked about Able Danger with the help of Colonel Schaffer and Captain Philpott, DIA officers. They're talking about Atta and other accused patsies being in the United States early in the year 2000. Then we had an absurd comedy of errors. The Able Danger people said that they had informed the Kane-Hamilton Commission in the person of Zelikow in a tent in Afghanistan that this group of patsies had been in the United States much earlier than was otherwise thought. Zelikow received the information personally, covered it up. It never appeared in the final report. When Weldon and the Able Danger people made their accusations in the summer of 2005, the Kane-Hamilton Commission first denied it, then they confirmed it, and then they denied it and said it was not important because it had no historical significance. So there's Zelikow covering up evidence, destroying evidence, and leaving out relevant facts. At one moment in the hearings of the Kane-Hamilton Commission, there's an exchange between Ashcroft, the Attorney General, and Picard, the former acting director of the FBI. Picard says, Ashcroft told me he didn't want to hear about Al-Qaeda, was not interested in terrorism, I should shut up and go away. Ashcroft in the same room says, no, that's a lie, I never said it. Now, one of those two is committing perjury. Zelikow is not interested in discovering what's going on.
As a reward for the job he did with the report, they put him on the President's Foreign Intelligence Advisory Board, which is a group you don't hear about very much, but is a very key link between what you might call the White House and the ruling establishment of the United States.
He is an example of the kind of invisible government operative who is part of the cover-up that will attempt to make sure that the truth about the 9/11 terrorist attacks is never known, all the while eagerly calling for military action against Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, and other Arab and Muslim states. This is exactly the kind of person that needs to be investigated. His actions in suborning perjury, covering up evidence, and making certain vital questions simply disappear from the report have got to be investigated in the most urgent way.